question is that the bill now be read a second time. I call the member for Fisher.
Thanks, Madam Deputy Speaker. And if you want an example of why you should not vote for the Greens, we just heard one from the member for Griffith. I want to give the member for Griffith and anybody who is even contemplating voting for the Greens at the next election or in any election a bit of a history lesson. It's called 1942. Oh my God. And in 1942, we faced an existential threat. Now, our traditional ally in 1942, up until 1942, was Mother England. But the Labor government at the time, rightfully in my view, as a result of the fall of Singapore, Australia was in great peril. And who came to the aid of Australia? Who was it? US. It was the United States. The United States came to the aid of Australia in the Battle of Guadalcanal. Thousands of Marines from across mainland United States came to a place that they had never heard of to fight a war that they really didn't have a fight in, and thousands of them died. Thousands of them died. Thousands of them fought to defend Australia. The Battle of Milne Bay, the Battle of the Coral Sea, changed the face of the Second World War, but for the actions of the United States in literally saving Australia, Australia would look very, very different today. But the Greens would have you believe that all of that is in the past, that we ought not even consider these things. Well, I can tell you, Madam Deputy Speaker, my grandfather served in World War II, served on HMAS Canimbla. And I grew up as a young boy constantly hearing these words, this sentence. It's really simple. Thank God for the Yanks. Thank God for the Yanks. I grew up hearing that time and time again, because the reality is Australia in 1942 could not defend itself.
So you're basing a foreign policy on 1942?
Today, in 2024, Australia can't defend itself. Now, that is a shameful position to be in. But the reality is, peer on peer, if we were to face a peer competitor, Australia would not be able to defend itself on its own in the same way that we were not able to defend ourselves in 1942. Now, they say if you refuse to look at history, you're destined to repeat it.
Like Iraq.
And if we did what the Greens did and is in their political manifesto and decimate the Australian Defence Force, because that's exactly what the Greens want to do, at a time when we live in the most geopolitically unstable period since 1945, the Greens want to decimate the ADF. That's what they want to do. They want to decimate the ADF. They want to rip the guts out of funding for it. They don't believe in defence. They don't believe in ADF personnel. It's very clear. I'd love to know how many Greens members are protesting. I'm surprised you're here today and not in Melbourne. I'm surprised that the member for Griffith is here and not in Melbourne, supporting his mates throwing rocks at Vicpol. But I digress, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I apologise for digressing, because the member for Griffith winds me up, because the member for Griffith and people like him have no appreciation for history, have no appreciation for the loss and sacrifice that our generations before us have made. They just think that this democracy that we live in today just kind of appeared. The loss, the lives in which we enjoy today in this country came off the back of servicemen and women from Australia, from New Zealand, from Canada, from Great Britain, from the United States. It didn't just happen. It's because countries like us stood up against tyranny in both World War I and World War II and said, we will not stand for this. We know it's going to cost money, it's going to cost lives, more importantly, but it's when countries do not stand up against that sort of tyranny that the world falls apart. But the Greens, it's all peace, love and mung beans, baby.
Yeah, peace is terrible.
It's all peace, love and mung beans. And it doesn't matter because the world is a beautiful place.
So you're against peace?
The world is a beautiful place. Try telling that to the Ukrainians. Try telling that to the Israelis. Try telling that to so many other countries who have been violated and invaded and attacked. Life just doesn't work like that. In a nirvana, you know, it would be wonderful if we didn't have to have... Be wonderful, wouldn't it, Opposition Treasurer, if you didn't have to find the sort of money that we have to find to fund our Defence Force. In a nirvana, it would be perfect. But you know what? We don't live in nirvana. We live in a world, sadly, where we have people like the President of Russia who has invaded Ukraine.
What has that got to do with AUKUS?
He has invaded Ukraine.
Are you going to deploy some...
President Xi has told his senior military to be prepared to take Taiwan by force, if necessary, by 2027. That is why, hopefully this bloke at the next election will need to find the money to fund AUKUS. And that is why Jim Chalmers, the member for... What's his electorate? The current Treasurer has to find the money to fund AUKUS. Because parties of government have a responsibility to ensure the peace and security of this country. Parties like the Greens, Independents, they can promise the world and give you an atlas. Promise the world and give you an atlas. But sadly, we live in a world which is, as I said, it is the most geopolitically unstable. Almost everybody agrees with that since 1945. That is why this bill, that is why AUKUS is so incredibly important. It's not just about nuclear-powered submarines. There is so much more to AUKUS than submarines. And I welcome the Defence Minister into the chamber because we've just had a wonderful exchange between myself and the member for Griffith about the need for the ADF, the need to properly equip the ADF with some of the most stealthy submarines that are available today. And I remind the Defence Minister, I reminded the member for Griffith that peace comes at a price. Peace comes at a price. There's an very old phrase that has been bandied around for millennia. You know the phrase, don't you?
We hate mung beans.
The phrase goes something like, if you want peace, prepare for war.
You see, you argue with the peace through war thing.
Nothing more.
If you want peace, prepare for war. If you want to provoke your enemies, then be weak.
Exactly.
And that is exactly what would happen. That is exactly what would happen if the Greens ever had control over the government Treasury benches. And we face a very real prospect. And I'm really pleased that the Minister for Defence is in here right now, because I earnestly believe, and I'm probably going to regret saying this in public, I earnestly believe that the Minister for Defence is a good man. It's true. It's true. It's true. I do believe he's a good man. I do believe he has the interests of this country at heart. But
you guys will be in coalition before anybody's in coalition.
We face a very real prospect at the next election that Labor and the Greens will be in some sort of a power-sharing arrangement.
That's it.
It'll be a power-sharing arrangement. It'll be a coalition. God knows, Minister for Defence, this bloke could be the new Defence Minister. He could be the new Defence Minister. He could be the new Defence Minister because he's so committed to the defence of this country. And the Greens, they will say to the Prime Minister, if it comes to this, if you want to remain Prime Minister, you need to have us at the cabinet table, you need to have us at the policy sharing table, the formulation of policy. The Greens will exact a very, very heavy price, Minister for Defence. You know that. I know that. We know that on this side. The Greens will exact a very heavy price on this government. And you know what? I hope we win the next election. I really do. I hope we do. That's what we're fighting for. But you know what? If we don't win it, I hope you win, that the Labor Party win in majority government, because the worst thing that could ever happen to this place, to this country, is if you guys are ever in a power-sharing arrangement with the Labor Party. God help us. God help this country. If the Greens are ever sharing power with the Labor Party again, just like they did in the last Labor Party, the last Labor government, God help us. God help us. And I'm making a plea to anybody who's watching this, anybody who's even thinking remotely about voting for the Greens. In the words of President Biden, don't do it, because you will significantly weaken the defence capabilities of this country. It would not even surprise me. And the region. It would not even surprise me if this government came under pressure on all things that we don't want to see. So I also want to encourage the government not to accept preferences from the Greens and the member for Griffith, et al., because, for the reasons which I've outlined, a power-sharing arrangement between the Greens and the government, which would only come into force by virtue of a preference arrangement. You know, I've sat and watched in the chamber for weeks and months, watched the government and the Greens fight over this, that and everything. But if the government is so against what the Greens have been doing in recent times, particularly in relation to Gaza, then the Labor Party should stand up and say, well, you know what? Just as they said to us decades ago, you shouldn't accept preferences from one nation, I say to the Labor Party, you shouldn't accept preferences from this mob, because they will bring you down. Sure as God made little green apples, this lot will bring you down. And not only will they bring you down, they will make this country a far less safe place than what it is, both culturally, both defence-wise and certainly economically. We cannot afford a situation where these guys get anywhere near the Treasury benches, because it will ruin this country. So anybody who's listening to this on the radio or watching this, You probably need to get a life, but I would encourage you, please don't support the Greens.